It's been really exciting to see GPU prices coming down so much in the last couple of months, but not every card is at MSRP. Some are still definitely offering much more performance for your money. So if you're looking for a new graphics card, which one should you get? In this video, I'm going to look at a couple of different performance tiers, which ones make the most sense. And I'm going to be looking at a few different, well, you know what, let's just jump right in. How are we going to do this? Well, first, I'm going to look at PC Part Picker to get an idea of what are the prices that sit in stock right now if you're not hunting like a stock drop Discord or take a look at my community page where I find a lot of good deals, I post them, but they sell out extremely quickly. A lot of people don't have time to spend hours every single day monitoring to see if the card they're looking for happens to have a good deal at that split second and buy it at that split second. So if you're buying at the price things are actually normally available in, I see you guys still argue about whether my thing in the is funny or just a waste of time in the comment section. That just increases my engagement stat either way when you talk about it. Anyway. RTX 3050. Why am I starting with this and I'm sorting low to high? Well, because this is the beginning of NVIDIA's current lineup, and so I see a lot of people thinking that, well, that's the place to go. Well, here's the problem. It usually sits in stock somewhere between $300 and $330, when its MSRP is $250. Now, I bought one for $250. It is possible. I saw them in stock again yesterday, but by the time I was about to post it on my community page, they'd already sold out at that price, and that's directly from evga.com, and if you don't have their elite membership, they charge tons of shipping. So in reality, these are around $300. Looks like today, right now, they're about $315. And I do not think you should buy an RTX 3050 at that price. It does not make sense. There are better options. I'm going to show you two better options. First of all, we could look at AMD's RX 6600, which comes in currently $15 more. And this, by the way, is the model that I actually have. And I can probably splice in some footage right now of these two cards competing against each other. So let's look at the RTX 3050 versus the RX 6600. The RX 6600 provides better baseline performance when you're not using DLSS or ray tracing. It's just better. It's significantly faster. In most games, you can just play them at their maximum settings and average 60 FPS at 1080p. And personally, in a lot of games, I turn it down to the high settings rather than ultra in order to get your minimums closer to that 60 FPS mark, even in more demanding scenes, averaging above 60 FPS. And if you're playing, less demanding titles, this will definitely be a high refresh rate 1080p experience. However, with the RTX 3050, there's definitely games where you already have to turn down to medium or use DLSS. And DLSS is a fantastic technology, but at 1080p, the image definitely does not look identical to native. It is going to be noticeably worse. You will lose some detail. There's going to be more aliasing. DLSS also introduces a little bit of ghosting. In general, DLSS at resolutions like 4K, the quality setting is almost free performance with a few minor ghosting issues, but at 1080p, it's certainly not. Although you absolutely can use it to boost performance, I'd rather just not have to. And the RX 6600 is certainly looking good along these lines. And if we ever did get to the point, which, I mean, of course we eventually will be, where the RX 6600 is not going to be delivering acceptable frame rates with acceptable settings at 1080p, FSR 2.0 has launched recently, only in one game, but years down the road, by the time this card is struggling, I'd imagine many more games would have it. And it is a reasonable competitor to DLSS, although I will admit that in its current format, DLSS, especially at these lower resolutions like 1080p, is the superior upscaling technology. Okay, so what if we don't consider the RX 6600? Or what if you do some kind of professional work where AMD just doesn't do as well? And that's absolutely something we need to consider here, although I focus mostly on gaming. Some people do need certain professional programs to work, and they work better with NVIDIA. Well, check this out. Here's why I also think the 3050 doesn't make sense. Because the RTX 2060 is still sold new, and you can get it for $330. Now, if personally I was buying this between the RX 6600 or the RTX 2060 at this price, I would go with the RX 6600 because it is slightly faster according to most reviews, although the margin isn't huge. Here's pulling up a relative performance chart from Tech Power Up. It's not perfect, but we are seeing the 2060 with only about 90% of the 1080p performance of the RX 6600. And of course, that'll depend on the game that you're looking for or whatever. But another difference is the 6 gigabytes of memory versus the 8 gigabytes on the RX 6600. So for better, a little bit better straight up rasterized performance and 2 gigabytes more memory, I'd probably go with the 6600. But if you prefer NVIDIA or do something that requires NVIDIA, then the RTX 2060, I think, makes more sense at this price point than the RTX 3050 does. Again, if we pull up this, out of the way again, this performance chart here, if we look at the RTX 2060, it is above the RTX 3050 in performance. The only thing the 3050 has going for it is the extra 2 gigabytes of VRAM and the slightly more mature ray tracing cores, which means that, like, if you looked at ray tracing, I don't think it falls as far behind. I haven't tested that myself, but I don't think it completely catches up anyway. So yeah, basically for solid 1080p performance, we're looking at 1080p 60 FPS with pretty good settings. My recommendation, the one that makes sense to buy, is the RX 6600. And if you need NVIDIA, the RTX 2060. Or you could look at the used market and see what's going on there. In this video, I'm focusing on new GPUs. Okay, now what if you either want extremely high refresh rate 1080p or you want solid 1440p performance? Well, my recommendation here, well, let's check it out. By far the best graphics card at MSRP of this entire generation is the RTX 3060 Ti. This delivers solid 1440p experience at, if it was if it was at MSRP, a fantastic price of $400. Well, currently the lowest one available on PC Part Picker, which scans tons of retailers, is $600. Now these do come available sometimes for less than that, but they usually sell out quickly when they're significantly below $600. A lot of times you can find them for around $550 and they'll sit in stock there for a while. But as soon as they get to around $500, they generally sell out like that. So what if we checked out the RX 6700 XT from AMD? Now, this is basically available for its MSRP. This is $5 over its MSRP at $485. And you can get a few different cooler design models here if you're willing to spend a little bit more if you don't like the MSI mech. Now, the RX 6700 XT has basically the same performance as a 3060 Ti. It wins in a ton of games, it loses in a ton of games, but if you don't count ray tracing, the 6700 XT actually does come out ahead. It has 4 more gigabytes of VRAM with 12 compared to the 8 of the 3060 Ti. And if they cost the same, then things like the better ray tracing performance and DLSS at 1440p, the quality setting is extremely usable. And I wouldn't blame you at all if you were using that just in general to boost performance. Well, in that case, your 3060 Ti might be the better deal. But the RTX 3060 Ti, like we just saw, sits in stock for close to $600. The RX 6700 XT, which gives you basically the same performance if you're not counting DLSS and ray tracing, okay, comes in over $100 less. I think that more than makes up for any of its deficiencies, and I think the better buy here by far is the 6700 XT, unless you absolutely have to have some kind of NVIDIA-specific features for work or something on professional programs. Now, at this point, I think we've run out of the good value cards, to be honest. I think that if you want 4K gaming, though, you really should step up higher. And at that point, I think you've got a few options. Your RTX 3080 does a good job at 4K. I use it at 4K myself. And they have come down to about $860, which is way better than the $1,400, $1,500 or more they were selling for a couple months ago. Now, These are the 10 gigabyte models. Sometimes the 12 gigabyte models get down into that price point and they perform slightly better, and I think that that would have more longevity on the VRAM. So I would look out for those 12 gigabyte models, but currently it's an extra $110. Now you can also look at the RX 6800 XT, which comes in less than that. However, I do think that at 4K, the 3080 has a little bit of an edge, especially DLSS being extremely good at 4K. DLSS quality is extremely good. So if they're priced about the same between the 6800 XT and the 3080, I do think going with the 3080 makes more sense. Now, one other thing you could look at, though, is the 6900 XT is occasionally down in that price range as well. Although currently we're seeing $950, which is below its MSRP, but that's $100 more than we're seeing the 3080. And these are already extremely expensive. So I think if I was shooting for 4K, I'd probably be relying on DLSS quality quite a bit, especially going into the future. And for $850 instead of spending an extra $100 on the 6900 XT, I think this makes sense. And obviously going to 3080 Ti's, you just spend a lot more and get very little extra performance. So those don't make a lot of sense. So I don't think I'd go with a 3070 Ti for 4K. I'm not saying it couldn't do it, but you don't save all that much money compared to the 3080, and you only have 8 gigabytes of memory, which I think if you're planning a 4K build is just kind of silly. So there you go. I think these are the GPUs that make the most sense to buy in the current market. I think for 1080p basic, just 60 FPS, awesome gaming experience, your RX 6600 or maybe the RTX 2060 is the way to go if you're buying new. I think at 1440p, I think it's the RX 6700 XT by far offering the best value for its performance. And then at 4K, I don't think there's anything that's really a good value. But I do think the 3080 for $850 seems to be the sweet spot if you're targeting 4K. Although you could certainly pay more, but I'm talking value here. I hope all of you have an excellent day.